Hey everyone, welcome back, and for those of you that are new to the channel, we make a lot of videos on DIY stuff, from fixing things to building things. Majority of the work is based on a lot of the specialty cars like you see in front of us, which is the 2010 to 2013 Range Rover Supercharged Sport L320. Today's video is actually about replacing the valve cover gaskets. The dealership says that it's an engine out procedure and it's $8,000 to $10,000 to have done, and the independents want $4,000 labor alone if I supply the parts. Well, I didn't feel that was going to be right, and some of you may argue that, you know, yeah, this car was close to $100,000 when it was new, and yeah, you can pick it up for $20,000 now, but you should be able to afford to fix it, and that's true unless you're able to do it yourself, and that's kind of what we're going to go over today. So basically, I don't believe the fact that the engine has to come out, so I'm going to show you how to do it without having to take the engine out and doing it right at your own house. Now, is it easier to do it with the engine out? Yeah, it is, if you have means and a lift to be able to do that, but if you don't, like most, it's not so easy. So I'm going to show you how to do that and get all that done while spending under $300 doing it all by yourself, as opposed to $8,000 to $10,000 like the dealer wants. So stay tuned. What we're going to do now is take out the battery, and we're going to start getting this thing taken apart. Alright guys, now that the battery is up and out of here, the next step is to get the whole intake plenum system out of the way. So what we want to do is we want to remove all the Phillips screws that go all the way around each box. So over here, and then there's also a 10mm hex right here that we have to take out the bolt. There's also another, and it's hard to see here, there's another clamp that actually clamps to the throttle body back here that you'll have to take off, and then this whole unit will pop right out. Next, we want to disconnect the mass airflow sensors, one on each side, one there, one back here. You'll want to make sure to go ahead and disconnect the plastic plungers, or whatever they're called, that hold the wire to the boxes so that frees them up. And we'll go ahead and pull this thing out. Oh, also, the hose back here. Alright, I totally forgot about this, but before you go trying to yank this thing out, there is a hose down below. As you can see right there, it's just a clip. You just got to squeeze it and pop it off. It's just an air hose, and then everything will release. Alright, so there's the complete intake removed and gone and out of our way. Just a couple notes. One thing I wanted to show you, careful when you're pulling it out, because this thing's very easy to break and you'll leak coolant out of there. And also, a while back, it's the most unbelievable piece of junk little plastic that holds this hose inside the thermostat housing down here. It broke off, and they don't sell just the one tiny little piece for you. You have to buy the whole unit. And it's just the worst design. They even had an upgraded design, or updated design, and it was terrible. So I actually took a piece of brake line and JB welded in here, and I've never had a leak since. That said, a little 101 for you guys, a little tip that I'd like to give you. And you probably already know this if you like to tinker with things. But typically when I'm taking things apart, I like to separate the bolts. I usually use bags. However, the 929 project actually took our bags, so whatever. But this does the same thing. I just write basically a note. And if you can keep these separated, you'll never have to worry about putting a nut or a bolt in the wrong place or missing one and whatnot. So that said, let's get back to the project. So now looking at it, our next step is going to be removing all our functional hoses, both coolant lines if they are in the way, and any of the vacuum lines that you see going across here, because keep in mind this whole supercharger has to come off to get these valve covers out. Alright, so we got most of the tubes out. I even pulled them out that run to the back of the banks for PVC or PCV or whatever it is. The only thing I have to get rid of now is basically this one, which is connected down underneath here to this main pipe, which runs again down to the motor itself, or I believe the thermostat. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out. There are some hex bolts, I'm sorry, not hex bolts, but star bit bolts that you can see down there. One way down in there we have to pull out. We got one, sorry about the lighting, one right there. I don't remember if there's any more that we'll have to pull out, and then obviously the coolant's going to fall out, but we got a thing down there to catch it, so let's get that done. Alright, so we got that broke loose, and then actually shifted it over here so it's out of the way. It holds out of its way, or out of the way pretty well, just by pushing it over to the side. one thing to note too, when you pull that off, there's actually a sleeve right here that you can very easily lose. So you want to make sure that you do not lose that. And I like to go ahead and just stuff this back inside there. The reason why is it's easy to forget when you try to put this thing back together. And it's not fun taking it all back apart for one little piece. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to pull out the throttle body. So we have 4 more star bit screws that hold it in right here. We've got an upper plug here and a plug here to pull off on the side. We're going to get that pulled out, and then we're going to go ahead and take off the belt because we need to be able to get the supercharger off. So we'll be using the tensioner down here and putting pressure on it, or basically relieving pressure so we can slide this whole thing off. Alright, before you guys yank off this throttle body, just FYI, you do have 2 coolant lines as a pass-through that run to the bottom of it. One has a normal connector clamp. The other side is like an Otakar style, like permanent clamp. So it can be kind of a pain in the butt. That one's even kind of hard to get to. This one here, it's not wanting to play. So usually what you have to do is you have to kind of unclip this top right here to loosen it up. And then I'll take wire cutters like this and I'll kind of get behind it and squeeze and slide it off. All right, so in regards to getting this serpentine belt off, you want to actually crank it counterclockwise. And what that'll do is that'll push the tensioner downward and loosen this belt. We can slide it off. What I do is I take a 3/8 inch ratchet with an extension on it so I can get some leverage, and I will pull it back and slide the top of the supercharger side off. So let's see if I can get this done with a camera in my hand. So there's that. And there it is. Simple as that. Now we'll just pull the belt out. Alright, so now we're at the point now we need to free up a little bit more room. We're going to try to get the coil packs all out, and by doing that we're going to have to disconnect all these wires. You'll want to probably take a couple pictures with your phone so you can remember how it goes back. I do that for reference. Unless you're going to label everything, you can put like a piece of tape here and a piece of tape here, put AA, BB, and so on and so forth. That's a way as well. The other good tip or trick with that is that if you ever see the extra taping, like if you use blue tape, you'll know that you didn't connect something because you didn't take it off when you reconnected it. So another good idea with that. Anyhow, we need as much room as these sides we can get, because this is really where they say it's an engine out procedure to do this, because you really have no room. So what I do is I kind of take bungee straps and everything I can get, or I can get loose, I'll kind of strap off to the side. And I say what I normally do because I've done this before. So I actually had to replace an injector before and it was not fun. So there's a special way of doing that. You guys will see how that gets done. I also saw another video on the full-size Range Rover that actually removed this rear panel back here to get more access to the back, because there's some hoses back here that are super hard to see and super hard to get to. So I might end up doing that, and to do that we have to take off the wipers and the cowl. And I know there's a main wire harness that runs all the way through here. So we might get there, but for right now, I'm going to try to get these coil packs out just so you can see maybe a little bit better what we're working with. It's pretty straightforward, even though you can't really see. There's also star bits in there. So we're going to unclip all this wiring that goes down to the valve cover here. Get it all unplugged, pull it out of the way, and then we will take all the screws out of there, and we will pull these coil packs out. On a side note, guys, I want to share with you the 3 most important tools that I own, that I use on every single project, and helps me out so much. So if you guys can afford it, you guys should definitely pick them up. Obviously, I will leave links in the description below for the ones that I've purchased. The first one, though, is a cordless powered ratchet. Wow. Absolutely amazing difference from doing everything by hand. All the weird areas that you can't get to, this thing does. There's no twist in your wrist. I think it was like $100 at Harbor Freight, and I'm telling you, it was well worth the money. I had an air-powered one. The problem with this, once you put the hose on, it's so long with the hose stuck to it, you can't get to anything really. I mean, if you're trying to get in tight spaces. So I definitely suggest using the cordless one if you have the money to buy it. Second tool, 1/4 inch impact. Oh, I mean, this thing with the 3/8 and the 1/4 inch adapters for sockets and stuff, this thing does everything. I mean, I don't take anything apart by hand if I don't have to. So that's number 2. This is a DeWalt. Yeah, there it goes. This is a DeWalt, so it's a little bit pricier, but you can get cheaper batteries, like you see on this one here, China-made batteries. But definitely I'd say number 2 tool, the ratchet number 3, this number 2, and the number 1, which isn't too expensive, especially at Harbor Freight, a 10mm socket open-end wrench. This thing, both the 8 and the 10, you will use this on everything. If you do anything with imports, this thing is your best friend. So those are the 3 best tools that I use. I thought I'd share them with you because, like I said, all this work, when you're doing it by hand, it makes it 10 times as long. So this stuff really, really helps. All right, now as far as getting this right rail loose, before this thing will completely come out, you're going to have to disconnect all the coils. But to get this thing out of here, all you're going to do is put a flat screwdriver in here and pry out like this, and it'll pop right out. That last one back there, I'm going to be honest with you, it was easy for me this time because I've done this before, but the first time, if you haven't done it before, it sucks. It's really, really hard to get to. But once you do, then I go through and I take out the coil pack plugs, and they're pretty straightforward. I know it's kind of tight in there for you to see, but you can kind of see that there's like a gray tab there. All you really got to do is get your screwdriver in there and slide, if I can do this with the camera, get your screwdriver in there and slide the tap out, just like that. And then all you're going to do is press straight down on it and pull back, and it'll come right off. Let's get that done now. Also, I totally forgot, you have to get the injectors off with this as well. The wiring for the injectors is also in there. So, as you can see, one there is already popped off. I just popped it out here with this plug. It's pretty straightforward, but what's going to happen is you're going to have to pop those off as you go back with them in order to get this thing lifted up to get to the ones in the back to break this completely free to lift it up. Alright guys, so you can see we're making progress here. You can kind of see I've taken the wire harness and bungeed it to the wiper over here to get it out of the way. So we're getting there, but this gives you a little bit better clearance so you can see kind of how the injectors fit in there and the coil packs. We're down to one more coil pack and one more injector, and it looks like maybe a third plug back there. And then after those are all broke loose, this valve cover should be completely free. We should be able to start getting to things. The next step after that, which you'll see, we'll be taking off these coil packs here. We'll probably have to compress some of this to get this out of the way because it is a pretty tight fit, but we will get it out. The biggest pain in the butt is going to be that monster right there. And if you're wondering what that is, that's part of this high pressure fuel system. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But that's, it's kind of a monster that runs at high pressure, and you got to make sure you relieve the gas pressure to get this thing working to a safe level. So follow with me here. Let me get this couple harnesses out, and then we'll start taking out these coil packs. All right, so I just took one out. It's pretty simple. You're just going to take your Torx bit nut out. And then when you go to pull these things out, you want to be careful. You don't just yank them out. You kind of want to wiggle them because it's rubber, and rubber gets sticky sometimes. So you kind of want to move it back and forth and wiggle until you hear it pop out. And there's your coil. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to pull out the other two, and then we're going to move forward. All right, there we go, guys. The bank is fully clear, so everything's out of the way. I want to apologize for the lighting. I know it's hard to see and everything. You get stuck having to use one of these shop lights, and it seems like they always work against you. No matter where you want to put them, they don't want to be there, and they don't want to shine light where you want them to. They want to shine in your face and whatever else. So it's always a fight working with those stupid things. Also, it's just so tight. Even if I had some kind of tripod to sit the camera on, there's no way I could get you to be able to see inside this tight little spaces where I'm working. So that said, hopefully you guys are kind of getting the gist of what it is that you have to do to get these things apart. But as of now, we're going to move forward. This side's done. We need to get this side taken apart and slung out of the way. There is a 10mm nut, I will tell you, in the back of this corner, and I'll show you. It's a pain in the butt to get to, but it has to come out. I've had it out a couple of times already. But we're going to get all this stuff pulled out now, and move forward from there. Alright, so here we've got 1, 2, 3 injectors and 4 coils unplugged. However, the last injector is really hard to get to, so it's easier if we take the coil packs out first. You'll notice wanting to get these things out of the way is going to make yourself a lot less angry. And the bolt I was telling you about, can you see that right there? What that is, that's actually a bracket of the 10mm nut. It'll pop off, and you're able to move these things somewhat, these AC lines, but man, you still don't have much room. It's really, really tight getting these coil packs out, so you're going to struggle with this for a little bit, but you'll get it. Like I said, just wiggle them out, kind of do as we said, take the hex bolts out, wiggle them out, and then you'll be able to get to that last injector and get this rest of this wiring harness up out of your way. Alright, in efforts to get a little bit more room to get to these bolts, this actually, I never noticed until now, this is actually removable. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the ECU, pull it out of the way, and move this cap out of the way so I can get more access down to these covers. Alright, so what I did was I went ahead and unclipped the 3 clips and pulled that first shell off. Then I'm going to remove 2 10mm hex bolts to get this thing loose, 2 5.5mm bolts to get the cover off the top of this ECU right here. We'll disconnect this, get this out of here, and it looks like I've got a couple 12mm bolts I can pull out and get this whole fascia off over here, so we'll really have a lot of room. This is good news. Alright guys, check that out. Look how much room we have now. I guess I'm cussing out Jaguar Land Rover a little less. I'm a little happy with them. But if you look down at the heat shield on the exhaust, you can see where our problem is. Once again, the valve cover gaskets are failing and just leaving oil everywhere. So correction to what I said earlier, these are actually, there's 3 12mm bolts, not 13. There's 1, there's 2, and then there's 1 way back down in there. And then there will be a little plastic piece right here you'll pull out, and then that whole shield will come right out for you. So it's pretty straightforward. Oh, and that computer module isn't the main ECU, it's a transfer case module. So let's move forward. Alright, so all the coil packs are out now. So really our next point we're going to focus on is going to be taking off the fuel rail and injectors, which brings me to a whole nother can of worms. So as I spoke about earlier, these injectors are like diesel injectors. They're huge. They're like 8 inches long, and they run at like somewhere between like 2,000 and 3,000 psi. I don't remember the exact number, but it's something that it's not like a regular car where you got some 100 psi in there. You've got 2,000 to 3,000 psi that's being pushed into these things. So what I did last time, what I'm going to do again, remember we shut off power to the vehicle by taking the battery off at the very start. So what I'm going to be doing is going to be, I assume it's released somewhat, some of the pressure, but leaving all these bolts on the main rail, the upper connecting rail. I'm going to slowly loosen this nut here with some rags around it to be safe, because even though it's got 3,000 psi, it's clamped down right now. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to come back and hit me. At least I hope not. So what I did before, and like I said, it was successful, just slowly let the pressure out of this one here with some rags to catch whatever gas comes out, and then I was able to pull everything off. So we're going to do that. But that said, I started thinking about it. Well, if I got this side off, well, why can't I take this side off? So I'm starting to think about it, and I see the same kind of clips. So I'm going to go ahead after that and take all this off before I take the fuel rails off to save myself some headache, because I think I can do it. So let's move forward and get some of this stuff done. Alright, good news. It worked again. It did spray out about 2 feet high, just a little tiny spurt at first. And so I backed up for a minute and tried to shake the tube as much as I could to see if I can loosen anything up, and then finished taking the threads off and pulled it separated, and pressure was already gone. So it backed itself down through the last hour or whatever it's been of the vehicle being shut off. So now we're going to go ahead and we are going to remove some more of these bolts. So we got one right there, we got one right here, one here, got an 8mm there, and then it goes down to our split, our adapter or whatever they call that, and we'll get this whole bar up here taken off. Alright, so now that the fuel rail is off, you'll see I removed all the bolts, and under the last 17mm nut, took the thing off and set it to the side. I think we're at the point now where the supercharger is ready to come off. There's really nothing else holding it down, with the exception of some hoses here in the back, like I had said earlier. So we've got a hose clamp there. I know there's a couple others back there. I don't remember exactly all where, but you'll notice when you go to pull it out, it will be it's stuck to something, and it's about all back there. But this supercharger doesn't just pull off. It's actually a 2-piece supercharger. So what we got to do is, you can see it's kind of got a split here. We've got to take the upper bolts off it and remove that. You'll have new gaskets you'll have to use on this, or you should use. You might get a boost leak, so I suggest doing that. But what we'll do is we'll take all those bolts off, and when those are out, you'll have main bolts that hold the base or the core of the supercharger in. We'll be able to lift that out and better get to some of the stuff in the back there. Alright guys, well, I got all the surrounding bolts off, except for the rears, which I'll show you what we're going to do now. I forgot to tell you also, there's 4 10mm hex bolts, long bolts that go through the center right here. And then to get the back out, there's a bolt here, a bolt down in here, and one there. And these aren't bad, but to get these ones out, I got to take this bracket out, which means I have to take out 2 8mm bolts, as you can see right there, and that bracket will come off. After that, we'll be able to pull this thing up out of here and see what we got connected in the rear here. Alright, so we got those bolts out. In fact, there was actually a 5th one I didn't see right here. So that's out. Now what we're going to do, there's an 8mm bolt right there. That's going to actually release this big plastic hunk from holding onto the upper intake manifold, or I'm sorry, supercharger manifold. We're going to take that off, and then we're going to see if we can lift this, basically this top half off it. Alright, now let's see if we can separate this top half. Oh, there it is. You see the gaskets pop off. So I'm not going to be able to do this obviously while on camera. I'm going to slide this back towards me, and I'm going to try to disconnect whatever any of those the vacuum hoses and stuff connected to the back of this I can, and then we'll get it pulled out and get you to take a look at it. Alright guys, well, inside the top of that supercharger are your intercoolers, twin intercoolers. I was mistaken, there's no hoses attached to the back at the top, so just kind of FYI there. Here is our supercharger here, and just kind of FYI, those intercoolers are definitely full of antifreeze. So be aware, even though they, you disconnected the lines already, they're still full of it, so it's going to come out. But here's the supercharger itself. You can see me when I spin the pulley here. It's our twin screw back there. So we'll be taking that off. Right now, it's going to be hard to see, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bolts to take off. Once I get those off, I'll be able to lift this supercharger back just like we did the top, and then figure out again the hoses that are connected to the back of it if I haven't. I know I did something custom last time I had this apart, so it wouldn't be such a headache. So you'll see mine probably looks a little bit different than yours back here. I've changed some of the hoses and stuff to make it, I guess it was a bad design from Land Rover, again, a lot like the antifreeze stuff in the front, the coolant lines, but I changed some stuff. You'll see that's a little bit different, but not a big deal. You'll be able to figure out. It shouldn't be too hard. But like I said, we're gonna get this thing pulled out of here, show you what it looks like getting out of the vehicle. Alright, so here's the supercharger base lifted up and kind of pulled sideways. It's holding itself up on the edge of this oil filter cap. What you're going to want to do when you have this out, make sure that you got clearance all the way back on all 4 cylinders. You don't want to pull out your gaskets. Remember how they go. If I remember correctly, they go a certain way. And usually the way you can tell is this little tab back here is folded down where it sits against the block. So just kind of a reference, but that is what you want to look for. And the same thing on the other side, you want to pull that out. But maybe now, with this at least separated, you can kind of see back there some of that stuff that's connected to the back with all the vacuum stuff. So I'm going to try to get all that disconnected. Once it's out, I will show you what exactly I had to disconnect so you're not guessing. Alright, here it is out. Let me show you what you had to disconnect. It was a pain in the butt. You got a vacuum hose on this side, just a quick disconnect, really easy. You got a plug here, which if you know it's there, it's easy to get to. I didn't, so that was the last thing to get unplugged. We took our 2 screws off our main bracket, is what held it on to the back of the supercharger, all the vacuum stuff. And then you had, I don't know if it's a PCV valve or what it is that connects right here. It's got 2 bolts. This one, easy. This one will make you hate your life. Straight up hate your life. I mean, it took me 35-40 minutes to get that stupid bolt out. I just basically wedged the supercharger over as far as I could, because it's like a rubber hose and you don't want to rip it. Just enough to get in there and barely squeeze with my fingers to break it loose, and the bolts are 1 inch long, so that's that. So there's a supercharger. Here's the engine with it off. Put some light on there. You can see some of that stuff back there. I mean, the annoyance, I would call it. So the bolts that hold the unit to the back supercharger go there and there. There's our vacuum plug, our electrical connector, the first bolt, and the pain in the ass bolt. So that's basically the unit that you're working with. I think at this point, when I put it back together, I'm going to take this cowl off. Whatever I can do to try to help the scenario. Also, too, as kind of a safety, I don't know if you've seen this in my other videos, but always plug up all your ports or the intake manifold, because you drop a bolt down there, you're in trouble. So unless you got a great magnet that's bendable, they can get exactly what you need, assuming it's metal and you can get it out that way. So anyways, here it is off. I am going to next, I actually may rebuild the supercharger. I got a special new style unit to rebuild it, and I'll probably show you how to do that. Alright, rebuilding the supercharger. I don't know if you can really tell, but this one's got play. You see where the screws aren't moving? But I got play. it really shouldn't have that much play. Some people say it can, but I'll tell you that I installed, the last time I had this out into the injector, I installed the smaller supercharged pulley, and I should be running like 12 to 14 psi, and it's only pushing like 8.5. So I know that something's wrong. I think part of it is inside here. So it didn't have that problem before I took it apart. That was the only difference. So I assume that's what the issue was. Anyhow, moving forward, to get this thing off, we need to remove the front snout. That's the part that's going to be rebuilt. We're going to have to remove the two 10mm bolts to get the vacuum actuator off. Then we got bolts that go all the way around it. But prior to doing that, I actually have to take this side of the plenum off, and the reason why is that bolt right there. Now, yeah, you could probably get there with like open and wrench and turn a quarter turn at a time, but it's a lot easier just to zip these off and pull this side off. So let's go ahead and do that. So there's the side piece removed. Again, we removed the three top bolts, and there actually is one 10mm bolt underneath it. And then you'll have a dowel, or whatever they call that, in the back of it that kind of tightens it on or keeps it aligned. So there's that, and now let's pull off the vacuum actuator and then the snout. Alright, all the bolts have been removed, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to pry it off from here. It isn't held on with some lubricant, or I'm sorry, not lubricant, but gasket sealant right now, as I put on last time I had it off. So let me set the camera down, get this thing off, and we'll take a look at it. Alright, and here it is separated. You'll see that this is the supercharger snout. There's actually no play in that whatsoever. And then if I go ahead and turn the shaft and the screws, there's no play on that either. Where the play is on basically a bad design by, I guess, Ford really, and the supercharger here. Those prongs there slide into this here, and it's spring-loaded, and it basically gives out after a while. So what they've done to try, at least an aftermarket company, has made a one-piece unit. So there's no longer worrying about these springs breaking and getting ingested in the motor or pieces or whatever, and it failing and losing, basically losing boost. It's I don't know what kind of plastic. It's a hardened plastic, but it's not a shatter, like a shatter style plastic. So that will go on there, which basically in turn goes right under those prongs there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get all this old gasket material cleaned up, and get this off, get the new one on, and get it put back together. Alright, here we go. We got both surfaces all cleaned up. We got the Nuke Weibo, or whatever you want to call this thing, centerpiece to the supercharger installed. All we'll have to do now is button them up. I gotta get a bead of silicone on that, or gasket material, and we're gonna bolt it back up. Alright, there's this all put back together. You'll see there's no play in the shaft anymore, so we're good to go there. We're going to get back to the vehicle itself. So getting back to this monster, we still have to take off the fuel rails and pull out the injectors on both sides. Once we get that done, we'll move forward to taking all the bolts out for the valve covers and pulling them off. Let's get going. Alright, so the fuel rail on the driver's side is out now. Again, it was just 4 bolts, and you kind of slowly pry it off. You can see the injectors in here. There's 4 of them obviously on this bank. Something to note, if you bought your vehicle used and you don't know if they've been ever replaced before, first indicator that you've had injectors replaced are the O-rings. So the old style was blue, the new style is green. As of the last I checked, that was the color scheme that they were at. So also on the sides, which you won't be able to see here, the sides of the injectors, it'll actually have a date stamped on it. So obviously if you have a 2010 and the ejector date stamped 2018, you know it's been replaced. So at this point, what we do is we slide these clips off right here, and we'll use the tool to slide these things out. While we're speaking of, here's one of the injectors. So that's obviously not a regular looking injector. The thing's humongous. So it's pretty much a beast there. So there is the product number on it. I believe, if I can get this with the thing on here. I don't know, somewhere around here it says the date. I don't remember where, but it says it somewhere. In any case, that's the injector. 2 different types of tools you could use. This is the first one. This is one you won't see very often, but this is the one that comes straight from China. This is their version of how they use it, and basically what happens is you kind of slide this thing over top of the groove here, slide this back down over top of it, and you use something to give leverage to pry that out. The other method is this one here. So same idea as far as sliding over the injector, except this is a slide hammer. So you kind of whack it out. Now, the first time I did it, I used the Chinese method because I didn't have this tool. Now we're going to try the slide method and see if it's any easier. All right, first one's out. This is actually the one that I replaced last year, and there was surprisingly quite a bit of carbon built up at the bottom of it. But I don't know if you can see it here. This is the one. Can you see that date right there? I believe that's some sort of date, 2019 or 2020, something like that. But that's the date on them. But anyways, 3 more to go. What you're going to do, I use the slide hammer like I said, and you're just going to lightly tap it out. It took about 4 taps. Don't yank on it because you will break it. You can even test it and you'll hear it click and turn on, but it will not work, so be careful with them. Alright, now I do say be careful taking these out that you don't break them, but they're going to be a pain in the butt to get out, just FYI. They do not want to come out easy. And again, a lot of that's due because of the carbon buildup that's along the base of them that's inside the motor. It kind of builds up and doesn't allow them to pull back through, but a little trick that I had to use, I couldn't get enough pressure with leverage popping this one off with the China adapter, so I had to use this slide adapter here. But the key is the trick I use is this has got to stay down, slid all the way down. In fact, what it does, there's 2 little teeth in there, and they get just underneath that lip right there. And what happens when you start pounding on it, this thing slides up and comes flying off. So I use vice grips to hold that down to where it's supposed to be, and about 5 good whacks and that thing came out. So, just a little trick. Alright, 4 injectors out. 2 of them, I can see cracks at the base. They're the original old ones that were in the back. I may have to replace them. I don't know if I want to take a chance of putting them in having a fail. They're not too bad. They're like $100 a piece. It's almost worth doing, especially if they've never been replaced before. Anyways, we're going to take off this valve cover right now, and so basically what we got to do is all the 10mm bolts all the way around it and down through the centers. You can see them all. They all got to come out, and we're going to lift this thing off. And there you have it, guys. Like they said, it couldn't be done, but it got done. We got it off without taking the engine out, so if you continue to look, you can kind of see. We'll see where the oil is dripping down on the exhaust pan. It's continuing to do so with that oil cover or the valve cover off. Our obvious problem. Anyhow, it's off now. There it is here on the ground. It's tough to tell. Its fail point was right here. I can see where some silicone or some kind of adhesive sealant or something was put on it to try to stop it. But that's your fail point there. So that's where the leak was coming from. But yeah, all these got to be replaced. Even these center ones here that go around the spark plug holes, you want to replace those as well. So we'll get to that next. Alright, driver's side valve cover back in. All the bolts around it and the bolts down the center are tightened and ready to go. Alright, so our next steps are going to be taking off the passenger side valve cover. Same deal as the driver's side, only difference is the main fuel rail pressure is coming into this side. So this part will be easy, but I've never had this off, and this looks like it runs down underneath. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, and give me a second, I'll be right back. Alright, quick update, almost there. We got the rail out. Unfortunately, actually brought an injector with it, which is cool, but it's kind of screwing us now because for me to slide this out, it's in the way, and there's some kind of electrical plug in the back, probably a rail pressure sensor, that I gotta get unplugged, but I can't see the back side of it to do so, so I gotta try to get this injector out. But what I did was, took a 17mm nut off, spun it off, took the 8mm nut right here off, got it loose, kind of pried it over a little bit, and I was able to pry this back out, and then just got a pry bar very carefully between the rail, since it wouldn't pull off by hand, and the valve cover. And remember, you gotta be careful because it's plastic, but that got it loose. Alright, it's out. So checking this out, if we look again, I can see this injector's been replaced, at least I assume, because the upper O-ring's different. I got 2 original blue and green ones here, and then the one that we took out, I can't tell yet, but if you look, you'll be able to see that right there. It has an a 10th the starting starter because it's 2010, so I know that that's the original there. FYI, the plug doesn't come off here. Plug comes farther back. It's connected right by the last fuel injector connector. Also, if you guys don't know already, it's not just the outside seal for the valve covers that leak. There's seals, which I'll show you here in a minute, that go around the spark plugs I kind of spoke about earlier, and those can leak too. And I don't know if you can really see, but a lot of that that hole there is full, or was full, plugged with oil that goes around the injector, so another area where it fails as well. But we're going to go ahead and take this valve cover off now after we get these last 3 injectors out. Alright guys, so I got the passenger side valve cover off after 4 hours. Hope I get some likes on this one. Anyhow, you can still see I have injector in there. I couldn't get it out. I've hit it with sledgehammers. I've pried from access point over there with the Chinese adapter and pulled with a 4-foot bar. It won't come out. So I don't know what I'm gonna do at this point. You can't really heat them up. But basically what I did was I took some snips and snipped right here and kind of pinched that, so I was able to slide through the valve cover and get the valve cover off. Anyhow, that said, let's move over to that. Here's a valve cover. Basically what happens is when these things get old, they turn to like plastic, the rubber does. And so it's kind of difficult to get out. The way I've figured to do it, because it's going to break in pieces, I just took a little I don't know, screwdriver type thing here, and I pried it out from the bottom on the sides. And this one actually is coming out pretty easy. The driver's side not so easy. But this is kind of where you get the hiccups because these bolts are stuck in. So what you're going to want to do is you can pop these bolts out to the top side, and you have a better chance of getting this off in one piece. And then of course we have to take off our inners, which we know are bad as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done now. Alright guys, just want to give you a quick update. So yesterday I spent 4 hours messing with these injectors, and today about 3, until finally it just broke off. I had hammered the thing so many times. I have tried everything from making the hammer on the slide, or the slide hammer, whatever that thing's called, the slide on the tool bigger, to using all kinds of different extensions for the pry side. None of them working, and then finally it just snapped off. So you can kind of see the difference here as to where it sits and where it snapped off. Not a whole lot left in there. So what I did was I took a 15mm socket and I hammered it over top of the broken bottom part and twisted it until the cap came off. And this is where we're at. So it kind of looks like a spark plug in a way. That one, obviously not that one. That one is a spark plug. And what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to get an easy out, and I'm going to try to twist this thing out and break it loose. It is magnetic, so worst case scenario, if anything falls into the cylinder, I can get it out with a magnet. Or I'm going to have to take the cylinder off, or the head off, which I don't want to do, and regardless, it's going to have to be done anyways if it doesn't work out. So that's kind of where we're left. I haven't seen anybody have this kind of problem. I've only heard of one thing, and that was a guy online saying that he actually pulled it out with a cherry picker. I haven't heard of anybody else having the problem but him and I. So if you guys do run into this, you can see what I did. It broke off. I'm able to move that back and forth with the screwdriver and kind of wiggle it, but it's still not coming out. So I don't know if it's corrosion that's holding it in, or if there's just a ton of buildup on the tip of the injector. Either way, it's coming out. We're going to get it out. So I just wanted to give you an update. That's kind of where we're at. Alright guys, there you have it. I finally got it all out. So let me go over kind of what I did. First, I had the slide tool and I hammered the hell out after I've spraying some Freol on it, which is supposed to be the best lubricant or penetrator. Didn't do anything, and then as I was hitting it or yanking on it, it ripped it in half, so it broke it down, so this part was gone. And then this piece was over top of this, so I took a 15mm socket, hammered it on it, turned it off it, broke the plastic off. Then I exposed this part. Now you couldn't get an easy out to get around this and the side walls of the actual head, so I had to put the easy out over top of this, and I believe it was a 10mm, and it broke everything off except it left this cap, the end cap, basically sitting inside where it goes. And so I just took a tap and tapped it into the cylinder with the piston all the way up, and then took a small magnetic tool in there and took it out through the spark plug hole. So it was actually pretty easy. So we're clear now after it's been, I don't know, 12, 15 hours of hell basically, but it's out now. So moving forward, let's get back and I'm going to show you how to get all the seals inside the valve cover. Alright, so here we have our gaskets. This is pretty straightforward. All you're going to do is you're going to line it up, start pushing it down as you go. One of the keys here to getting this valve cover back on is making sure that the gasket doesn't fall off when you're trying to install it, which happens on a lot of vehicles. So the key to do that is actually taking your bolt and pushing it in. And what it does, it clips in underneath the rubber here, so that rubber doesn't come out anymore. So all we're going to do is we're going to go around this whole thing here and do that, and then we're going to inset our spark plug ones as well, and we'll have it back on. Alright, real quick, here is a quick shot of what it looks like all together. So again, I've pressed all the grommets down in to hold this thing in, And now what we're going to do is we're going to take some paper towels and some carburetor cleaner. We're going to go around and we're going to clean all the edges to make sure all our surfaces are clean and get ready to bolt this thing on. Alright, so all our bolts are back in here on the passenger side valve cover, all the way around it and down the center. So what we got to do now is we're going to go ahead and clear out the ports for all the injectors, so there's no grime when we push the new ones down in there. We want to make sure they seat properly and that it's clean seat. And then after that, we're going to start putting the fuel components back, the rail, and get the main rail connected back to the rail over here. And it's assembly time from here on out. I guess we've got all our replacement items in. So another FYI, if you already have this apart, it doesn't hurt to clean these PCV diaphragms right here, or even replace them if they've never been done before. Mine got done about 6 months ago, so no need to when I had the part the last time. But anyways, it's cheap. They're like 20 bucks for 2 of them on Amazon. I definitely replace those because the supercharger sits like this, so you can't get to them if you have the supercharged model. So let's get things put back together. Alright guys, so the next step is to install the new fuel injectors. We're going to do that now. We are going to start with the passenger bank and then work over to the driver's side. Alright, so here's the injectors all installed. Just simply hand pushed in, nothing too hard, just enough to get them set in place because the rail will actually lock them down. Now, just FYI, you guys don't have to put new injectors in. I chose to just because I didn't want to have a chance of failure of the injector, either now or in the near future. So I just thought for less than 90 bucks, which you can pick them up for, which will be linked in the description below, is well worth it, because if you don't, you're going to have to change the O-ring and the lower Teflon ring that's on the tip of the injector, or at least you're supposed to, and that's 20 bucks itself, so per injector. So I just went ahead and replace the whole thing. But what we'll do now is we'll get the fuel rail in, we'll get everything bolted on, and then we'll start getting some of this rail hooked back up. Alright, so the passenger side rail's in. I went ahead and put in the injectors, the clips, 4 bolts, and I even hooked up the main rail with the 2 17mm nuts that attach. I still have to put the 8mm to hold it down. I'll do that after I get everything else connected. I am now on the driver's side, finishing it up. I just want to make sure you guys don't forget, for one, these injectors are opposite. They are on the downside rather than the upside, like the passenger side over there. And also, don't forget to put these clips on. If you forget these metal clips, these injectors will shoot out. So you obviously don't want that. They're easy to forget. I just want to remind you of that. I'm going to go ahead and bolt on this other rail, and then we are going to start putting on the supercharger right after I clean the manifolds up. Alright, detour. I think I'm going to go ahead and put in the coils and hook up the injector wiring, since it's really going to be kind of easy to get to right now, and it won't necessarily be in our way for the supercharger. In fact, it'll get kind of some of the stuff out of the way for us to get the supercharger on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I put on that supercharger. Something I do like to do too, before we put these coil packs on, make sure you use a little dielectric grease. It helps get them off in the future, and it helps keep connection for you and stop moisture from getting to the plug in the wire itself, or the coil itself. Wiring on the driver's side's all done up. Wiring on the passenger side's all done up. Now I just cleaned the gaskets, or the base surfaces, and the supercharger surface. Got it mounted up. Put the far left plug in, the far left PCV vacuum line thing hooked up. And now it's for our favorite one, the bolts from hell. And here's what I did. This star bit, if you can see that or not, that's what was in there. Well, it ain't what went back in there. I put the exact same size bolt with a 10mm head on it. Easy. And I got one of my favorite tools called the automatic electric cordless ratchet, and it took care of it. So that part's done. This thing is about to get set back in, and we're going to move forward by getting the top back on it. Also, as a note, guys, just so you're aware, when you get this thing on, you're trying to get it on, don't put your gaskets down there. Lay a shirt over top of your portholes or your intake holes. Take the whatever you had stuffed in them out. Lay something over top so you don't drop any bolts down it. And then after you get all that stuff that I got done in the back of this thing done, then we're going to lay our gaskets and slightly, or carefully, set this thing back down on top of them and line them up. Alright, it takes some wiggling, but the supercharger's back where it belongs. Now what we want to do is we want to look down our portholes and line up our bolts in our gasket. And so what I did is I just kind of take a sharpened, well, it's kind of a, you can call that a pick or whatever you want, but I kind of slide it down into the cylinder hole or the bolt hole, kind of wiggle it around so I can get them all lined up before I start putting in my bolts, and then I will loosen shaking it until it seats itself to where it's supposed to be. Alright guys, so after you have all 8 of those bolts turned in, maybe 3 to 4 turns, just hand loose or hand tight, whatever you want to call it, I want you to go ahead and put your hands on the outsides of this and shake it basically back and forth like this until it seats itself right in place. You'll see the gap between the supercharger here and the actual top of the engine. You'll see it get smaller and smaller as it seats, and you'll feel it, you'll know. But then you're ready to go. Get ready to torque it down. Alright, she's all torqued down. Now's a good time for you to, if you're going to, a lot of people probably skip this part because it's an annoyance, but if you want to put the bolt back in that goes right there and the one that goes right here, you're more than welcome to now. It doesn't really move without it, so I'm not putting them in. I don't really care. But if you want to, you don't ever have to worry about services, you don't have to worry about servicing this thing ever again, well, then by all means go put those in. But for right now, we're about to put this gasket on right here, which is our supercharger gasket, which goes in between the bottom half of the plenum and the top. And then we're going to put our top on and bolt it on. Alright, so one glove later, we got the supercharger back on. Started off bolting the 4 centers, worked our way from the inside out, torquing them all down. So those are all mounted on. We got in the back 2 rear bolts holding it in. We plugged this tube right here back in. And I think that's pretty much it. Now we got some cleanup to do. We're going to start working with some of the fuel rail and some of these coolant pipes, and then actually right before that we'll probably put the throttle body back on, and we'll be rounding down pretty soon. It's just getting things put back together, and we're on the road to almost being done. Cool, so we got this wiring harness completed here. It's all hooked up, as well as this harness over here, and now the throttle body's on itself and connected. Don't forget, again, to make sure you put the sleeve inside the coolant line here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to put on the fuel rail by connecting the 2 17mm bolts, or nuts, and the bolts that hold it in. And then we're going to go ahead and put on the coolant lines, and we'll take it from there. Alright, so we got the fuel rail on, and all the coolant and vacuum hoses back on here. Now I'm working on getting these outer shelving areas back in. And then we're going to get the transfer case computer back in there, and the belt back on, obviously. And that's pretty much it. Once the battery's back in, all we gotta do is do a burp the coolant, and we should be able to start it. Alright, both side boxes are back in, as well as the battery. Now I just gotta figure out where this plug goes here, put in both the dual intake system and all the connections for the throttle body, and that should be it. And then, like I said, we'll have to do the coolant fill up, and this should start right up and be ready to go. Alright, so I couldn't find anywhere for this wire to go, and then I realized that I had found this weird little cap thing laying in the back, and if I kind of reach the wire around, it's kind of about where it was laying, so I'm going to assume that this is what this thing went to. So I'm just going to go ahead and tuck it back down here somewhere so it's out of the way, so we can get everything back over top of it as far as the lid. Alright, there you guys have it. Both intakes in. I went ahead and connected all the wiring. Don't forget to run your wiring where it has to go. Big important part. Make sure this hose gets in, and most importantly, make sure you get that hose connection there on. You don't want to forget that, because that's the one that's underneath. It's easy to forget. So after all that's said and done, and you've clamped down the throttle body screw up here around the throttle body, then we're good to go. All we're going to do is we're going to add some coolant and get this thing started up. Alright guys, so here you can see it's running now. We got it started, everything's good. The battery was below 12 volts, so it wouldn't start at first. I had to charge it, but it is good now. Everything's put back together, just with the coolant. I'm going to tell you that it's not fun bleeding this thing. There's 3 points that I know that you can bleed it from. You got a bleeder screw here, you got a relief valve here, and a bleeder screw way up there, which is now a screw because I tried to take it out and it just broke because it's old and plastic, so that's what happens. Anyhow, your best bet, what you're going to do, fill up the coolant hoses as high as you can before you put the upper coolant hoses on. And if you can even take this off without breaking this, You can use a hose to fill this all the way up to the top. It's going to relieve a lot of your headaches. Problem is, if this does break, the dealership doesn't ever seem to stock them. You have to order online, so then you're going to be waiting to drive. But it's a mixture of loosening this up and loosening the bleeding screw, trying to get your front end higher in the air, and just keep bleeding it out until you start feeling hot air come out of your vents. So it's pretty straightforward. Anyhow, that is the video. I hope you guys found it helpful somewhat, and you're able to do it yourself and save yourself some money. If you liked it, throw a thumbs up, subscribe for more good content, and I appreciate you watching.